We are welcoming you back, and we will turn our attention to Ukraine and the latest from that situation with our first guest in just a moment. But there's something that I did see over the past day or two, and the head of Planned Parenthood, Cecil Richards, she's the president of Planned Parenthood, and she was asked by, let's see, on a show called America with Jorge Ramos. I guess it was on, I don't want to shortchange it here, it was on, I believe it was, well, I shouldn't say, I think it was on Spanish television. I'm looking for the, I can't find it. But anyway, nonetheless, it doesn't matter. Here, listen to this. You want to cry, you want to hear something? Listen to the question and listen to the answer. She's asked when she believes life begins. Here's cut 4.
So for you, when does life start? When does a human being become a human being?
This is a question that I think will be debated through the centuries, and people come down to very different points of view.
But for you, what's the point?
I mean, it is not something that I feel like is really part of this conversation. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, we work with women. I guess the way I'd really like to I think every woman has to make her own decision. What we do at Planned Parenthood is make sure that women have all their options for health care, mm-hmm. and that they have the option to have a healthy pregnancy. They have an option to put a child up for adoption if they decide to carry a pregnancy to term, or they have the right to make a decision to terminate a pregnancy.
But why would it be so controversial to say, for you to say, when do you think life starts?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's controversial. I don't know that it's really relevant to the conversation. But I mean, for me, I'm a mother of 3 children. For me, life began when I delivered them. They were they've been probably the most important thing in my life ever since. Mm-hmm. But that was my own personal decision.
Okay. First of all, that's Fusion TV. My apologies, Fusion TV. And did you hear that answer? For her, her kids' lives began when they were born. When they were born. Okay? But she made it clear that that's for her. Women should have the choice that if they don't want their kids born, they shouldn't have to have their kids born. She will not address when life begins. Just like Barack Obama when asked, when does life begin? And he said, that's above my pay grade. Well, if it's above your pay grade, and you claim to not know, if you really don't believe you know when life begins, then shouldn't you be erring on the side of caution and erring on the side of giving the life inside the mother the benefit of the doubt? If you don't know when it begins, if you don't know if it's conception or first trimester, second trimester, whatever you don't know, well then shouldn't you be looking to abolish abortion? Unless you have no problem fundamentally with taking the life of a child. And that's what the radical left has no problem with. That's what this woman has no problem with. That's what Barack Obama has no problem with, taking the life of a child. And in my opinion, he has no problem taking the life of a child not yet born or just born, because he voted present several times in Illinois, in the state Senate, on a bill that would have granted the same protections to the babies born of a botched abortion, born alive, that any baby born alive would get. Oh, well, then you're going to have another doctor and too much politics. Who argues that point? A woman goes in for an abortion, the baby's born, you're darn right that baby's going to get every protection imaginable. But that wasn't easy for Barack Obama. Couldn't say that. He didn't say that. So the radical left and this woman, for her, life began for her kids when they were born. They weren't alive until then. She would have had no trouble aborting them. That, in my opinion, that's a sickness. That's an illness. And that's scary stuff. Okay, we move on to a different kind of scary stuff, and we welcome in Michael Rubin. We welcome back to the show, resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and author of a great new book, Dancing with the Devil, The Perils of Engaging Rogue Regimes. Hello, Michael. How are you, sir?
Pretty good, Steve. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Good to talk to you again. Okay. You were quoted recently. You were talking about Putin and Obama, and I think we discussed this when you were here when we were talking about your book, but you talked about the fact that Obama gets played at the table by Putin, and here we've seen more of it, no?
Absolutely, we've seen this. And unfortunately, it's becoming the rule rather than the exception. The problem is when Neville Chamberlain goes up against Machiavelli, Machiavelli's going to win.
That's a heck of a way to put it. Yeah, absolutely. Tell me what you believe set the table for Putin to know that he could do what he's done without suffering, any kind of serious consequence. I mean, you could argue that he suffered some financial consequences immediately, although future financial consequences from the international community, Italy has already said no, probably. We don't know what France is going to do. We don't know what Great Britain is going to do. But what gave Putin the idea, in your view, based on Obama's foreign policies leading up to it, that, hey, I could do this?
Well, first of all, just a series of voided red lines. And I think Vladimir Putin came to the conclusion that whatever came out of Barack Obama's mouth was theoretical. It wasn't real, and Barack Obama wasn't going to back up what he said. We saw this in we saw this in Syria. We saw this with regard to the Iran negotiations, and Vladimir Putin figured, why not? And even when Barack Obama threatens economic sanctions, let's be real. The price of oil goes up, and Vladimir Putin benefits from that. John Kerry is off in the Ukraine. I doubt he has anything more in his suitcase than a bunch of white flags. And the fact of the matter is we see a consistent pattern with this administration, and I'm sure in his 90-minute phone call with Vladimir Putin, Barack Obama didn't go much farther than threatening double-secret probation.
Yeah, well, I would bet that you're absolutely right. And you compare this, Michael, to Ronald Reagan. You made an interesting point that Ronald Reagan believed in talking, but at the end of the process, not talking at the beginning. When it came to dealing with rogue nations and others, describe how that difference makes such a difference in the outcome.
Well, ultimately, it comes down to leverage. It's unfortunate that for this State Department and Barack Obama, leverage is a dirty word. But, while we're singling out Barack Obama for how he has created this disaster of American diplomacy across the globe, let's be real. Remember that when he was first inaugurated, you had any number of professional diplomats get up and say, finally, Barack Obama represents the philosophy of successful diplomacy. The sickness in our strategy goes far beyond one man. It permeates our State Department to the core.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you one more question before I try to quickly get your view of the Obama-Netanyahu meeting yesterday and from what we saw outwardly anyway. But let me ask you, how does this end? I mean, is Putin going to just keep what he has and hope everybody forgets about it? I think as John Fund said it in the previous hour, I don't want to put words in his mouth, I think that's what he was trying to say. Or does he try to go further here?
Well, from Putin's, the answer to that is yes and yes. From Putin's perspective, he has watched Barack Obama.
You mean da and da?
Exactly, da and da. I mean, basically what happens is he's watched Barack Obama. He understands that Barack Obama will start talking tough, that momentum might be building, but if he being Putin, offers an olive branch, offers an opening, suddenly all the momentum evaporates. We saw this with the Syrian chemical weapons deal. Never mind now that the Syrians aren't complying with the deal and Barack Obama is letting them get away with it. So what we saw today was Vladimir Putin's press conference, in which he said, no, I have no intention of occupying the Crimea. Well, all of his troops are still there, but it was just the rhetoric, the words that Barack Obama needed to hear in order for any fortitude to evaporate.
All right, let's move on, Michael, to the Israeli-U.S. relationship. And Obama gave an interview yesterday to Bloomberg and talked about how Mahmoud Abbas is a real partner for peace and really wants peace and blah, 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 and talked about, how the Israelis, boy, if they don't come to the table, if they don't make the tough choices, then, I really can't be. He echoed what Kerry had said in the past, that, the international isolation may come a time when we can't do anything about it. The only thing he didn't threaten was the Intifada, as Kerry had previously threatened. But here was a president of the United States saying this, and for good measure, talking in about how harmful Israel building on Israeli land was. What's going on here? More of the same, right?
Absolutely more of the same, but I don't think that Barack Obama understands that, be it with regard to his rhetoric in the Ukraine or with regard to Israel, how he emboldens the enemies. And if the Palestinians, let alone the Iranians, let alone Al-Qaeda, believe that any intransigence is going to lead to Israel's demise, then it gives every incentive for the Palestinians, for Al-Qaeda, and their influence among Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas and so forth, to encourage intransigence. I mean, what Barack Obama does every time he opens his mouth is really set back any hope for peace. What we really need to do is be absolutist, going back to George W. Bush's June 24th, 2002 speech, when he basically said, there's going to be no peace process until you, Palestinian leadership, forswear violence.
Yeah, and of course that's not the case. And again, Obama placing, I haven't heard one word about the preconditions that the Palestinians have put in place for Israel for them to come to the bargaining table. I haven't heard one word about the incitement, about the violence, about the terror training camps, about the attacks from Gaza. Nothing. It's all Netanyahu has to do this, Israel has to do this, and the tough choices have to be made and stop those settlements, because that's, when we have a Secretary of State who says that global warming is just as big a threat to us as terrorism in Iran, what do you expect from a president who then says those building of those settlements are just as bad as, or worse, than Hamas firing rockets every day into your country?
Well, you're absolutely right, Steve. I mean, I do wish that Barack Obama would study a little bit of history. If he's that deeply interested in the Arab-Israeli conflict, what he should do is look at the life story of Anwar Sadat. A lot of people remember Anwar Sadat, the late Egyptian president, as a great peacemaker for his dramatic gesture of flying to Jerusalem and eventually the Camp David Accords and the Egypt-Israel peace treaty. But what they forget is before Sadat took that leap, he tried to eradicate the Jewish state through war, and it was only when his military was soundly defeated that he came to the conclusion internally that he could only achieve his aims through peace. He was no longer going to be able to achieve any aims through violence. That's a decision that hasn't been forced on the Palestinian leadership.
Yeah. All right, Michael, a pleasure to talk to you again, sir, and thank you very much for coming on with us.
Thank you, Steve.
Take care. That's Michael Rubin, resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Great book that we highlighted here with him on the show a couple of weeks ago when it came out, the Dancing with the Devil, The Perils of Engaging Rogue Regimes. And it's so true. I mean, in my opinion, and I asked Mark Obama, Barack Obama's half-brother, about this. Turns out Mark Obama is Jewish because his mother was Jewish. Barack Obama and him have the same father, but different mothers. He's a secular Jew, but nonetheless, I just feel that that Barack Obama inherently has a problem with Israel, inherently has a problem with Jews, and to some extent, and I believe that his global view, in his global view, his worldview, he views Israel as the only imperialist nation, and that would include Great Britain, that would include the U.S. and others, that he could do something about, and that he could punish, and that he could make an example out of, and he's doing his darndest to do it. Hopefully Netanyahu will remain strong. On the Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax Television.
The Steve Malzberg Show.